Okay, well, I think we've got good enough group here to get started. Thank you for all coming out and joining us this afternoon. Real quick, my name is Andy White. I'm on the board for the Data Science Alliance and then also head up startup operations for Kesha Ventures. Today we have Sharon Zhang, who is the co-founder and chief technical officer for human.ai, joining us for our presentation. We're going to keep this relatively informal. Of course, we like the two-way communication and take advantage of the technology that we have here. I'll be facilitating the questions and answers, so you can just put any questions that you have into chat, and I'll help convey those to Sharon after she does kind of her initial intro into things. And then, of course, I have a few primers if things are not coming in as quickly as we would like. Oh, thanks for that suggestion, Tony. The participants may want to switch to all panelists and attendees as well. May swap that out. But yeah, let's get things going with you, Sharon. Please, give us a little bit of an intro and then about yourself and about human.ai, and excited to hear part of the story of your journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll do a quick intro of myself, and then I'll go straight to speaking. So I am Sharon Zhang. Like Andy said, I'm with Human AI Labs, and our website is hu.ma.ai. So we're a San Diego-based startup. We are super excited to, of course, being introducing ourselves here and really get hooked up into the tech system. And especially I'm excited to be here. I actually moved down to San Diego during the COVID time, so I haven't had time to interact with many people in the physical space. So I'm glad to see everyone here, both new faces and friends, and actually some of my friends from past are also here. So good to see everyone. So about myself, I have about 15 years of experience in both academic and commercial or industry AI applications. So I had a quite healthcare focus in my startup experience. I built models for patient-specific, doctor-specific speech recognition models, really extracting insights from patient data to build models that's very help them to decode essentially like what are the risks for heart diseases, what are the risks for hospital admission rates. And in addition to that, I have been in a few startups, and this is my 5th startup actually. So I'm always attracted to the building from ground up and really making an impact with the technologies that we've built. So hopefully throughout my talk, you see that passion coming through, and all of us at Human AI shares in that passion of building this individual AI for every single individual person here and in the world, sorry, not just here. Okay, without further ado, I want to probably have about 20 to 25 minutes of speaking, and now we can jump into answering any questions or discussions you may have. So speaking of AI and speaking of sci-fi, I hope some of you are sci-fi fans here. So who are fans of Black Mirror or Entire History of You? And I guess the only way we can do it is in the chat. What did you love about it? If you remember the episode where the person is able to replay back the conversation that he had, the visual memories that he had, and he's able to also bring them back to show other people, hey, this is exactly what you said. So if all of you could, drop in what you loved about it or what possibly made you concerned. That'd be interesting to see. Oh. Okay, cool. All right, so I think I'm probably having a little bit of trouble looking at the chat.
I put in there that it didn't seem to end so well, but other than that,
tell me more.
Pretty cool technology.
Cool.
Got adrenaline rush.
Very cool. So for everyone, I would like you to maybe spend a moment to close your eyes and recall your most memorable moment in the past week. So think about what was the time of your most memorable moment, or the people in the conversation or in the note that you're writing to. What were you talking about? What made you excited? Why was it a memorable moment for you? Okay, cool. So second, I would like you to think about your most memorable moment in 2020. What was that moment like? And what are the details that you may remember from that? Everyone has their favorite memory, favorite moment in their head visualizing. Cool. So today, you can open your eyes if you like. So does everyone see my screen okay? Cool. Whoa, it's a little bit large. So you can still see my slides, correct?
Yeah, it's not full screen, but we can see it.
Yeah, I'm trying to make it full screen without making full screen on my screen. Okay.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, sorry, technical difficulties. Give me a sec. All right, I think I may have to stick with the half screen here.
That's okay. That works.
All right, cool. So today I'm here to talk about memory. Right? Humans forget, and that's what makes all of us human. And in fact, we forget about 80% of what we talk about and what we experience after just about 3 days. And usually that forgetfulness is on 2 separate axes. So if you think about the details, which are people, place, time, and the exact words you're saying, those things fade. And even if I just think back to what I have spoken about 20 minutes, 20 seconds, 30 seconds ago, I don't remember the exact words. The other axis where your memories fade is because of time. So think about when you're recalling your memory, your favorite memory in 2020 versus your favorite memory in the past week. What are the differences that you see? What are the things that you remember and the things you don't? So we tend to only remember abstract ideas as the time increases between now and when your memory were created. And we perhaps may remember how we felt. For example, I remember it was amazing experience moving down to San Diego and having a winter where I can go to the beach, right? But not necessarily the exact details of the color of the ocean. So here I am to tell you our story on solving this exact problem of memory retention and recall. And we do that by using technology and by building your individual AI. So what does that mean? Oh, yes. We have a philosophy or a principle in our company, which is you don't solve the human, you solve the problem. So we care about solving the very human problem of memory, whether it's about your spouse's favorite food or about the talk that you attended that day or today. There are essentially 2 key components to how we think about solving the problem. First, we want to create your technological memory stack. If you think about memory stack, we imagine is a timeline of your memory blocks. And each memory block is nothing but a collection of images, a collection of text, a collection of audio data that is inherent in your daily life. For example, currently I am creating all these memories with all of you. So as you go through your day, your memory stack is constantly growing, and your biological memory only has a certain capacity. And we want to be able to build that ubiquitous memory stack that you can carry with you, but on the technological basis. And second, what do we do once we have built your memory stack? Then we can train your individual AI models on top of just your memory stack. So the key here is to think about AI training not on the Internet of Data or the domain of data. For example, I worked a lot in healthcare, and we trained a lot of data based on an entire hospital's patient records, but that is not individual to the person. And what we really want to do is to create that individual experience for just you by training only on top of your memory stack. And since this is a data story, I'll walk you through the journeys that we took in the past few months when we were developing our technical solution, both in terms of building the algorithms that powers your AI, as well as building the infrastructure that powers your AI. So my goal is really to communicate what we have learned in our journey. Of course, we didn't do everything right. No one does everything right. And I just want to communicate kind of the principles that we have learned throughout our journey. And hopefully that will provide some insights to what you're building currently. So to speak a little bit about the landscape of the algorithm in AI and in the NLP space. In the past decade, we have seen a lot of advancement happening in the AI field, right? And we see a rapid adoption of AI technology moving from academia to commercial applications. And today you probably notice there are many .ai companies around, and you probably notice most people are using some form of AI, whether it is to tune industrial applications or in the hospital or even touching individual people's lives. And in the past 3 years, the pace of NLP development has really exploded. And that comes in twofold. One is there are a lot of availability of algorithms as well as models coming out of tech giants such as Google and Facebook. I'm sure many of you have heard about BERT model, which has made a tremendous difference in the field in helping us achieve a state-of-art technology or state-of-art accuracy in terms of looking at both language translation as well as speech recognition. And then there's also this thriving open source community that supports all of the availability of these algorithms and development on top of them, such as Hugging Face. And I think the magical moments for me is that some algorithm truly surprised us and created these moments that may not have been expected. Right, one of the example is GPT-3 from OpenAI. This was created last year during the summer and is trained on a massive amount of data of the internet. And I'm sure many of you have either seen or shared your favorite GPT-3 demo. So personally, my favorite demo is a text to UI element generator where I can simply type in a button that looks like watermelon, and that would get a button design for me that is pink in the center and green on the outside. Right, so I think those magical moments really defines what AI could potentially do for us. And in my opinion, we're still trying to discover exactly what type of application we can make something like GPT-3 useful for and impactful for all of us, right? So that is the macro environment of AI. And earlier in our journey in building our MVP, this was quite a bit of time ago now, we were constantly assessing and evaluating the state of the art in the field. And the field was moving really fast. And the question we were trying to answer is really building individual AI, building this recall of your memories. Is there one algorithm that can rule them all, right? as you can see here, I am a sci-fi geek and I'm a fantasy geek. So there will be many sci-fi references throughout the presentation. And I would like all of you to perhaps think, do you think there is one algorithm that either today or in the future will rule them all? So take a moment to think about that. So in our journey, these are the problems that we're trying to solve, right? First, we want to be able to recall memories around facts. And that is thinking about what is the birthday of Zoe, right? Zoe is actually Suman's daughter, who's our CEO. And it could also be memories around a synthesis of information. What I mean by that is I probably talk about human AI thousands of times in my memory. And how do I think about answering the question, or how do I think about creating an AI that answers the question, what is the vision of human AI labs? So those are the things that we're trying to solve. And in our journey, we discovered really the principle that these problems or the use cases are multifaceted. Hence, the solutions or the algorithms are also multifaceted. So for us, the answer is there's no currently one algorithm to rule them all, right? And we also discovered that more or less is more like infinity stones. Having many of these different type of algorithm that really fits into your use case and really fits in iterating to solve the exact data problem that you have is what is needed to completely complete the solution. Sorry. So one of the problems that we tackled earlier on is how do you answer factual questions, like I mentioned, right? And for us, factual questions come from two distinct sources. One is if you think about all the memories you're creating from text or from speaking, these memories are essentially what we can consider free text. And there's a lot of information in the free text, whether it be numbers or people or facts about numbers and facts about people. And then there's another source of where these factual information may come from, which are what we call metadata, right? So if you think about having a calendar event in your calendar, I have people information embedded in there. I have time information also embedded in there. And I may have surrounding contextual information relating to that event. So we try to solve this problem in many different ways, right? One thing that we discovered is for metadata, it is not a, okay, so the two algorithms very specifically that we thought about is, can we leverage open domain question answering systems? So open domain question answering system is essentially taking a context and a question and to be able and find the answer with the question in mind inside that context. So what that requires is that first, the information has to be inside of the contextual information that you're giving to the system. And the second thing is, in reality, these systems are quite slow because you have to be scoring on quite a lot of passages. And there's no great way to score across passages. So it does a great job if you simply paste it in, hey, this is a Wikipedia article about San Diego and answer me the question about San Diego from this article. But it doesn't do so great when you have many, many memories around San Diego. And the second key insights that we found is because the metadata are discrete elements in the system, and generally they're not associated or written into the free text, there is it's quite troublesome to actually integrate them into the free text models, such as open domain question answering. And the best way that we found to tackle those type of information extraction is to be able to construct knowledge graphs. So knowledge graphs are representations of context such as time, people, emotion, space, place inside of your memory in this graph organized fashion, right? If you think about the nodes in the graph as people in your life, just simply, and then the edges of the graph as interactions between these different nodes, that's essentially your own personal memory graph. And in our application, we found that the combination of the two is what works best to ask factual questions and to be able to answer both questions around when is the last time I talked to Andy and around what is the birthday of Zoe. Right, so those are some of the learnings that we had from the algorithm side. Now, I'm gonna jump a little bit into talking about the infrastructure that we're building for individual AI. So if you think about the availability of both the compute, such as GPU, it has been exploding also in the past decade, both in terms of costs, also in terms of the ability to do large amount of compute, really drove the advancement in deep learning, right? So what that means is it made GPUs not only accessible to startups like us, but also individuals like all of you, right? And the computational costs to the amount of compute that you can do right now is growing at similar speed as Moore's law. At the same time, there's lots of development in tooling as well as automating the infrastructure. This is both enabled by things like Kubernetes that virtually allows infinite scaling depending on the memory consumption, depending on the user, depending on other type of metrics. And also the flexibility of the infrastructure also is granted by these containerized or microservice infrastructure. So one of my favorite examples of how accessible the scaling is currently is AI Dungeons. So AI Dungeons is this one open source application that someone developed out of a hackathon. And the idea is that for those who are familiar or not so familiar with Dungeons and Dragons, through using GPT-2, which has around 355 million parameters, they are able to support 1 million users to generate in real time these dungeons and the actions that the user can take to navigate across dungeons. And this is all run by a few people in open source community, right? And the cool thing for me is that they literally got around 1 million users signed up in about a week. And they had to shut down because the cost was so massive. They spent about $50,000 on GCP within the week, which is obviously not sustainable. But after they shut down the operation, it only took the community about 12 hours to figure out a scalable and cost-effective solution to support this open source community. So I think that speaks to where the scaling and the capability of the infrastructure today, right? And as pertaining to our story, our journey to find the right infrastructure to use for building individual AI. In the very, very early days, we actually found ourselves migrating from GCP to Azure to AWS in search of what is this best and the right choice for building this infrastructure. And essentially, we found ourselves deciding between these two questions. Do we want to build an entire infrastructure for one person? Or do we want to build one infrastructure for all the people? Right, so what that means is, do we want a shared environment for everyone? Or do we subscribe to building that individual user's pod, if you will? So the principle that we came down to here is that we want to create an experience that makes the user think the experience is built just for them. By the way, this is a quote from my brilliant co-founder, Christy Kaiser, who designed all of these lovely sites that you see here, as well as really everything about our product. So what this means is that we want to be able to achieve two goals. One goal for us is that the data of the individual user is highly private. So we want to be able to maintain the ownership, the access control, as well as the privacy of the memories of an individual, and give them the control and transparency over that. And that, technically speaking, amounts to two things: separation of storage, as well as separation of compute. And at the same time, we also want to guarantee real-time performance for the user as well. So that means when the user is trying to recall their memory, this should be a real-time experience and not delayed or a few seconds later type of experience. So our decision point there was that we ended up to establishing a partnership with Oasis Labs. And Oasis Labs does blockchain technology that ensures ownership and the security of the data end to end. And essentially, they provide two types of solutions. One, they provide identity management as well as ownership of the data and transparency and control over the data for that particular user. So what that means is when Andy, for example, is speaking into the system, the data is encrypted on the device. So Andy's key would be the only thing that would decrypt. And then that encryption is carried all the way through into the storage, as well as the modeling itself. And the modeling, also the compute part, is happening off-chain. So off-chain meaning the compute is happening in a secure cluster that is not hosted specifically on blockchain. But before the data and before the models are entered into the compute environment, they're still encrypted by that person's or that individual's key. So once they get shuttled into these hardware secure environment, they're called secure enclaves or TEEs, they then get decrypted and worked on by the computer itself. And the amazing thing there is, as a user, you will be able to see exactly which compute is executing on which type of data. And you have full control over how do you control the access over that data. So if one day you want to say, hey, I don't want my audio to be run on this time period, you have full control over that. But the key here is that by keeping the audit trail of the user's ownership and the user's access on chain, we guarantee that the data is highly private to the individual. And by using the compute off chain, we also guarantee that high performance that's useful for creating a real-time experience for that person. So I think that's all the things I wanted to talk about for our story. So before I open up for question and answers, I just want to communicate a little bit about the vision of the company, right? So we imagine that for you, yourself, your family, there will be an individual AI, much like today you have an individual Gmail address or any email address, I suppose. And we are seeing that as the future for us, right? And the future for everyone. So think about what does it mean if you could invite any 5 people in the world to a dinner party. And consider, I guess, who you would invite. I guess here it should say 5 AIs to a dinner party. Cool. So that's all the materials I have. And I would love to take questions if you guys have any.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Sharon. We have had a couple of questions come in. Please keep those coming either in the chat or in the Q&A section, and I will get to those as they come. The first one we have is from Diego, and he's asking, can this algorithm service be applied to clinical use cases, such as applying it to Alzheimer's disease?
That's a good question. So we definitely thought a lot about the dementia or the Alzheimer cases. We haven't done a field testing, of course, because we're still in the early stage of the company. But how we think about the roadmap is for clinical type of uses. We want to make sure our technology is mature enough for this group or this population of people to heavily rely on this, right? So for example, in the Alzheimer case or the dementia case, the user themselves may forget to turn on their capture device, right? Or they may forget to charge their device. So if that is the case, how can we make the technology robust enough so they don't have to think about that? They don't have to remember, right? So for us, that is a longer term roadmap, but it's definitely something top of our mind.
Okay. And then next question in from another Sharon. How do you fact check the data effectively before feeding it into the AI models?
Yeah, that is an excellent question. So the way that we think about it is that the memory stack, which is part of our product, is used for the user themselves to give us accurate data. So because of the individuality of the data itself and the security of the data, we really rely on the user to give us that type of feedback. So as you're correcting the your own transcriptions or you're correcting your own textual data, that part will be the one that's fed into the system. But we largely would depend on the user to do some curation of their own data.
And then Sharon also noted that she's intrigued by the concept of outsourcing human memory in a personalized way. You already referenced kind of the dinner party concept. Can you talk a little bit more about kind of the maybe more business potential of how you see that working and where this could go?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the best way to think about it is in a team today, right? Whether you're in a lab team or a working team, when you're collaborating on a Google Docs document, think about real-time collaboration. Even when the person may not be there, but their AI is available, right? So for example, if I want to write something about blockchain technology, I can invite my co-founders to be in the same document. And when I want to ask about, hey, what do you think about blockchain technology? What did we say the other day? Or what did you say the other day? I can simply choose their AI and I would get that specific thought from that AI, right? And the control over that is solely controlled by the individual who owns that memory.
Right. Let's see, next up. Do you see AI in general or this product being able to help solve problems such as climate change?
Be more specific. I guess I don't know in what aspects you're thinking about. You can clarify that.
So Harris, if you want to give a little more specific example, I think general answer is yes, but, and we'll have to see how we can help with that. We'll move on to the next one and wait for a reply on that. Here's not such a softball question, but
okay.
big thinking. Do you think sci-fi shows like Westworld do an accurate depiction of the future of AI? And in that same realm, what's your prediction for the next 20 to 40 years?
Wow, 20 to 40 years. I think that's beyond my predictive power. Westworld is an interesting one. It's one of my favorite shows, actually. I do think a lot about AI ethics, not just in the form of what AI will do for humans, but also what how we perceive AI if they really become sentient, right? But to answer your question, I think AGI or sentientness is still quite far away. So that comes down to, is there one algorithm to solve them all, right? And I don't, personally speaking, I don't think that is happening in the next 10 to 20 years. But one interesting thing that you can think about, and I think about all the time, is your AI might be able to consume data that you're not consuming, right? And then what does that mean? It essentially learns more memories beyond what you have, right? So it's an interesting thought for sure. In the next 20 to 40 years, I think there would definitely be a AI marketplace that is serving more or less like a Reddit or like Wikipedia, where you can access the individual knowledge of every single person's AI. And that means I would be able to talk to Bill Gates' AI about climate change. I will be able to access Andy's AI about the San Diego tech world. Well, how we think about it is that will provide a way for people to communicate their knowledge to others, right? So we can all learn from each other. And today, I think that part is definitely moving from having to publish books to having articles on Medium where people are communicating their thoughts and communicating their knowledge. And I think eventually that will be more ubiquitous, and many people can access the same AI at the same time. And you don't need to be restrained by the time limit or access.
So next question in from Alex. This makes me think of, a question that I've been pondering for a while now, is just the simple question of what does it mean to remember something? At one point in time, of course, that was rote memorization that we have stored in our brain that he references here as kind of biological storage. But of course, we all now have this device that's at hand at any moment, and that device is moving closer and closer to be integrated into our body. So his question just starts with kind of this transitional phase. Do you have anything built into your roadmap where an individual could be asked or tested on recent memories to then help strengthen their biological storage of memories?
Yeah, I love that question. So we talk a lot about this concept of rememory. So the concept of rememory is that as you emphasize or reinforce your memory on a certain subject or on certain book that you have read about, then you become better and better at actually remembering them, right? So definitely, I think it's not on the immediate roadmap, but it's definitely something we want to move forward to. Especially for the use case where learning and students and all of us, I guess, lifetime learners would be keen to do, right? So definitely we think about building an AI not to replace part of your memory, but it is to augment you and being able to make you perform better or remember better, right? So we definitely think about the use case of using the AI to reiterate certain important facts that you may want to remember. And I think just to like talk a little bit more about the product itself, or not the product, but the experience itself, as you're speaking or as you're typing, we will be intuitively looking for relevant memories to surface up. So even by that action of surfacing up the things that you may want to remember relevant to the context that you're in currently, that serves as a version of rememory to help you remember, hey, last time I talked about individualized AI, I was at the San Diego Data Alliance.
Okay. So here's one that I think ties into something much bigger than the question itself. The initial question is, are there any interesting patterns that you've seen on how different people recall the same global or local events? Of course, with what you're talking about, there's huge privacy concerns. And so can you talk a little bit about what you do have access to see, and what are the patterns that you're looking for and working with? And then what are some of the areas that you don't have access to, and information that you wouldn't be able to report off of?
Yeah, definitely. So we cannot see individual memories. And that I think is to a large extent the raw memories that someone has, right? And then, but what we do see and what we do use are, I would say, like aggregated trends, right? So for example, how much memories that you might be accessing a day, right? Like how much memory you're recalling a day. And what is the statistics of you accepting the system's recall of your memory, right? So that's something that we can see. And we can also see things like how much feed do you generate per day, right? And what are those variety of feed? So we do see insights and analytics, but those are aggregated number content, and we never really see any specific memories.
Alex asks, since you're using blockchain, will you be doing an ICO? And if so, can he get invited?
Yes, so if we do ICO, you can definitely be invited, Alex. So I don't want to talk too much into the future, I guess, because we are still in the, I guess, ideation phase of thinking about our monetization and where we want to go with that. So I think we'll probably have a little bit more information in another quarter or two when ourselves are sure about like what are the roadmap or what are things that we want to strive for in terms of go-to-market, in terms of tokenization, and in terms of monetization, right? So it is something that we thought about, but it is not definitive.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, here's a poignant one. Humans tend to naturally erase painful memories. Have you thought about the mechanism to control memories to be surfaced and how that interacts with other parts of our experiences?
Yeah, that is actually a very, very good question, because I think earlier on when we talked about we want you to never forget, we do get questions around, but what if I want to forget, right? And I think largely we give you a mechanism of control over that. For example, you can forget or black out a certain time frame of your memory if that is something painful for you. By that I mean like technologically you can black out, but we do not on our side do that type of control when we're surfacing the recall experience. But what we do hope is that when you are recalling memories, the prompts or the context that you're giving are things that are not painful and the things that will not bring in memories that are painful to you, right? But we do not make that judgment call on our side.
So Sharon, you use the term recall a lot in what you're talking about, which is not necessarily, I mean, it's a common term in certain ways, but not necessarily in reference to what we're talking about. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that differs from just asking a question, and then also how that differs with human.ai versus us interacting with Alexa or Google?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Thanks, Andy. So the way that we think about recall is that people recall their memories and people search for information. So if you think about what type of information you want to access through Google or Alexa, for example, you would go to the search bar, you would think about a question to type, you would type the question, look at the answer, and then you would have the facts or the information associated with it. But how we think about recall is much like how humans experience their own memory retrieval. So what that means is when I'm speaking to Andy or when I'm speaking to Alex or Sharon, I naturally will recall, hey, when was the last time I saw Alex before he moved into Colorado, right? So that type of natural retrieval is not prompted by a question from me. It could be prompted by a conversation I'm having or simply the context I'm in. For example, I am talking to Alex right now, so the system should be intelligent enough to bring back information in my memory about Alex. So the recall experience is a real-time driven and non-interrupted experience. So that's how we design our system. Oh, I think you asked the second part of the question. So what does it mean to ask human AI instead of asking Alexa, right? So think about the way that you would interact with Alexa or interact with Google. So I say, hey, Google, tell me the weather today in San Diego. But how we think about interacting with your human AI is essentially you're maybe silently asking the question, hey, Sharon, what was your favorite food? Or when did you last saw Andy, right? As a very implicit query that is sent to the backend without you explicitly stating it.
Yeah, and then typically when you're asking that weather question, there's a reason why you want to know the weather. And the personalized AI will have the context for that. It's really what you're wanting to know is this a day that I will enjoy going out and paddleboarding? And right. The weather's a part of that, but there's a lot of other pieces. So if you can answer that whole concept for me, that would be great.
Yeah.
So next one up here in out of chat, William, I think he's starting to get it. Just within his question, it's like there's hundreds of uses, maybe even hundreds more. So we're up to thousands already that he's already starting to think about for this. He's interested in knowing what feature or use case is the one that you're most interested in that you can build for yourself and use it.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would love to hear your 1,000 use cases, William. So for myself, it probably goes back to the motivation of why we started Human AI, or at least for myself, right? One day I was talking to my dad some time ago, and he mentioned the fact that, hey, you're a little bit busy or very busy. But how do I talk to you when you're not here? How do I know you're okay? How can I check up on you and what's going on in your life? Right. So as both of us are engineers, we sat down and we talked about the current state of NLP, the current state of communicating voice and sharing data, and if that was possible, right? And I think by the end of the conversation, my mind was kind of set to solve that problem for not only my dad, but my grandparents, everyone's parents, everyone's grandparents, to really having the AI as a vehicle for other people to communicate or for other people to connect with you, even when you're not here, right? So I think that is the use case I'm most passionate about. And I know eventually, of course, we'll definitely get there. But that is my personal motivation.
First time I forgot that. So in from Michael, humans seem to like, human.ai seems like something I'd want to leave on and listen throughout my day, just letting it collect everything. Are people using it this way? Will it be available for mobile? I need human.ai to go.
Yes, and yes. So people are definitely using that way, and that is the type of experience we want to design. We want this to be something that's ubiquitously capturing and ubiquitously recalling without you having to take action. Again, that goes back to thinking about the human experience and how we go throughout the day. I should be not having to remember clicking a button to capture certain conversations. I shouldn't have to remember to search in Google about certain information or searching my phone, right? So that's definitely how we design the system and the direction of the company. As for mobile, it is coming. It is on the roadmap, short-term roadmap. So we will be rolling that out sometime in the future. But currently what we have is a web app application that is living on your computer because, COVID times, many people are not going out yet, but we do imagine that ubiquitous capture on your device. Yeah.
Okay. Bit of a loaded question, but Sharon, is there a way that everyone that's here participating in today's session can go and register their own unique personal AI address?
That's a very, very specific question. The answer is yes. If you go to your browser, type in hu.man.ai, you should be able to do exactly just that. And I'm guessing the intention is to explain what your unique AI address is. Yes. So much like your email address, or if you think about the IP address of your computer on the network, this is how we envision your AI address would be. So we talked a lot about accessing someone's AI or accessing your own AI. How we construct that is it is tied to a domain, which is your AIP, that is specifically only to you. And the key here is that when you register, you would have, say, andy.hu.man.ai. That will be Andy's unique address. And that is created for anyone to be able to access Andy's AI if he was to expose that. And the idea is that in the grand scheme of things, these will be the IP addresses or the AIP addresses where your AI lives.
All right. Well, we are coming to the end of our session. We've managed to make it through all of the questions, I believe. If you did ask one and I missed it, please let me know. But thank you very much, Sharon, for joining us today. Very informative, and obviously looking forward to seeing where all of this ends up. Any parting words of wisdom or anything you'd like everyone to know?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are definitely actively, if this interests you or if this is something you're passionate about, which I'm hearing a lot of passion through the questions. So since I can't see your faces. So I would like to invite all of you, if you are interested in AI, interested in having, talking more about this with any of us, to join us on Slack and website. So if you sign up, we'll definitely enable you to come into our product. So the other thing is that we are recruiting AI talents in local or remote spaces, and we're really looking for people who will join us on this mission. So appreciate if you have any recommendations, if you think yourself or someone else is a good fit for the mission and the vision of the company, please shoot me an email at sharon.humanai.
Fantastic. On behalf of the Data Science Alliance, I would like to thank everyone for coming out and joining us. Please feel free to reach out to us at our website or out to Sharon with her information that's there on your screen. And we all look forward to continuing the conversation.
Cool. Thanks, Andy.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Data Science Alliance. All right. Thanks, everyone. Okay, bye-bye.